Shabbat Shalom. So of course, now that the Olympics have come to a close, we know that the most famous American male swimmer is... That's right, Ryan Lochte. Who's getting a lot more press coverage these days, right? It's Ryan Lochte. Now, of course, unfortunately, he's not getting press coverage for all the right reasons. We know that there was some question. Ryan Lochte made a claim that he was robbed by people dressed as policemen down in Rio. And it's come to be, as we find out over the last week or so, that that's not actually the case. That he made up a story because he had actually seems to have vandalized a gas station or a retail store or something like that. And so he's made up a story to try to cover up what he actually did. And he tried to blame it on what we know is the problem with crime down in Rio. So here Ryan Lochte's become the most famous American male swimmer, even though Michael Phelps, of course, has all the medals. But Michael Phelps, by the way, is also no hero himself. You remember, he got into a little bit of trouble a few years back, but we don't remember that because, he just got the medals. Instead, we're focusing now on Ryan Lochte. And I'll tell you, my initial emotion with regard to everything that Ryan Lochte has done is anger. Here he is representing the United States of America. He has this awesome chance to go, swim in a pool in Rio. And he gives us a black eye because of his choices. It's embarrassing. It's a shame. And I was reflecting on that when I came across another article about Olympic swimmers. And this one talked about all of the time, the hours, the agony that goes into training for the Olympics. These people put in 6 days a week. Often 6-8 hours in the pool itself, let alone all the weightlifting and training that they do, let alone the commuting back and forth. And what do they do it for? So that 4 years later, they might have a shot at winning Olympic gold. Thousands of hours of their life are dedicated to what is ultimately a race that's just a few seconds long. Now, when you think about it like that, we might have some rahmanas, some forgiveness, some mercy when that race comes to an end if the competitor doesn't know what quite to do next. And what this article that I read came to say is to talk about the level of depression and mental illness experienced by Olympic athletes the moment the competition is done. Here, all their lives are geared up toward one thing. For 4 years, they're training. There are people who've already started training for the next Olympics 4 years from now. All geared up for that one competition. And what happens when that competition is over, win or lose? They have troubles. They combat mental illness because they don't know what to do next. Because the chemicals in their brain have now changed. And they have to deal with whatever the results of that are. So keeping that in mind, we might have a little rahmanas, a little forgiveness on Ryan Lochte. Now don't get me wrong, he broke the law. If a guy breaks the law, he needs to be punished. He needs to suffer the consequences. But maybe in our hearts we can offer a little forgiveness, a little sympathy for what he and other athletes have done. Certainly for their own self-promotion, certainly for themselves and their families, but for the United States of America too, to represent us. And so it got me thinking about this issue of mental illness. Now, there are, of course, no words in biblical Hebrew for mental illness. But if you'll turn with me, please, to the end of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy chapter 28. I'm on page 1152 in your Eitz Chaim Kumashim, page 1152. And it's not in this week's Torah portion, it's a few weeks from now, but here Moses is addressing our ancestors. And that's what happens in this Torah portion, Parashat Ekev. Our ancestors are preparing to go into the promised land without him, without Moshe. And he's standing there on Mount Nebo, and he gives 3 final sermons to the Jewish people before they continue on without him. And here in Deuteronomy, Moses is warning our ancestors what happens if they fail to follow the mitzvot, what happens if they fail to follow God's laws. page 1152, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 28. It says, "The Lord will strike you with madness, with blindness and dismay." And if you look a verse above, a verse after, you'll see all these things that Moses threatens our ancestors if they don't follow the commandments. The Lord will strike you with madness, he says. Yikaha Hashem Bishgaon. And if you look at that word, those of you who are able to access the Hebrew, Bishgaon, there are 3 letters in the root: Shin, Gimel, and Ayin. Bishgaon. Now that may not seem like a familiar word to you, but if you jump ahead a few verses, I'm now on the next page, page 1153. Moses warns our ancestors that a people you do not know you shall eat up the produce of your soil and all your gains. You shall be abused and downtrodden continually. And then now in verse 34, Moses warns our ancestors if they don't follow the commandments, that all this bad stuff will happen until you are driven mad by what your eyes behold. And of course, what is the Hebrew for that? Vayita Mishugah. You see that same root again, Shin, Gimel, Ayin. And of course, it's a word much more familiar to all of us. Meshugah. This is the origin of the expression Meshugah. Crazy, mad. Meshugah is one who has been afflicted with this madness. And as far as our ancestors were concerned, mental illness was a punishment from God. But elsewhere it comes to say that mental illness, this state of Meshugah, of madness, can also be the result of a crisis in one's life, of a particular situation that leads one to go and become Meshugah, to become mad. And that's really the extent to which our Torah deals with mental illness, with this idea of craziness as the Torah refers to it. But as we come down later to rabbinic literature, the rabbis deal with it much more. The rabbis come to talk about this idea of Meshugah, of mental illness, in 2 ways. One, it says those who are truly Meshugah, those who are mentally ill, in my translation, aren't bound to all the mitzvot. They aren't bound to all the commandments, because they're not totally in control of what they're able to do. And thus they can't be held accountable for their choices. They aren't able to be held accountable for their choices because of the depth of their mental illness. And as the rabbis continue to talk about this idea of Meshugah, they actually come to deal with it much more in the realm of suicide. And we know, many of us, that throughout the centuries, the suicide in Judaism has been treated very poorly. The person who commits suicide is not allowed to have a eulogy said for him. The person who commits suicide is not allowed to have Kaddish said for him. And even in some circles, the person who commits suicide is not allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. All that has changed in recent times, though. Because it comes to say that anyone who commits suicide of free will should have all these punishments occur. We know now that suicide is a result of mental illness and not of free will. And thus, whether it's Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, you consult any rabbis, and they will come to tell you that there are no longer punishments for a suicide. Of course, we discourage it for all the right reasons, but we don't punish the person after he or she is deceased, and we don't punish the mourners, the family of the person who commits suicide, because it was not a conscious choice that they made. It was not a result of free will, but a result of mental illness. And as we in our own day and age have come to learn that mental illness is not a weakness of character, but mental illness is a product of brain chemistry. The brain being really the last frontier of medical science. We're just starting to learn about it. Now, God forbid a friend or family member of yours should have cancer. But when someone in our society develops cancer and they want to tell other people, go up to their friend, their family, they say, I have cancer. What's our response when someone tells us that? Perhaps we say, I'm sorry. Perhaps we say, God be with you. Perhaps we say, what can I do to help you? When someone comes up to another person, a friend or family, and says to that person, I have mental illness, what do you say? Perhaps if they say, I have depression. Perhaps they say, I have an anxiety disorder. Perhaps they say, I'm manic depressive or bipolar. What do you say? We don't yet know. But mental illness is really, in so many ways, the same category as cancer. It's not a result of the weakness of character of the individual in front of you. It's not because they can't control themselves or they're not tough enough or they're not strong enough. Like cancer, it's something that has happened to them. So perhaps our response could be, I'm so sorry. God be with you. What can I do to help? How can I support you? In just a couple weeks' time, we at Shaarey Zedek and the Berman Center for Jewish Education are hosting a 5K run and fun walk for families called Erase Mental Illness and the Silence. Because at the end of the day, that's how so many of us deal with this question of mental illness. We don't talk about it. We're ashamed of it. We're not sure how to deal with it. So on September 11th, beginning at 11 o'clock a.m., I will be running, and I hope some of you will consider joining me in this Erase Mental Illness, Erase, R-A-C-E. As we seek to raise money for Jewish Family Service, as it leads our community in combating mental illness, but also allowing us to begin talking about it in the same way that we might talk about cancer. How can we support each other? September 11th, 11 o'clock a.m. It's in your Shabbat cards. If you can't run, I hope you will consider donating or volunteering. If you need information on it, go to the Shaarey Zedek website. It's in your Shabbat cards. If you want, you can even select Rabbi Starr and sponsor for me, because I'll be running. And I need more money than everyone else there is. Shameless plug. Erase mental illness and the silence. This Shabbat, as we begin to contemplate what does it mean for us to be the people Israel who continue on to the other side of the Jordan River. Upon us it is obligated all of the mitzvot, the commandments. Let us remember one commandment in particular. You shall not stand by while your neighbor bleeds. That's what mental illness causes. But we can't see it. We can't touch it. And thus we're not sure what to do about it. Let us stand up for those who battle mental illness. Let us support Jewish Family Service as an organization that leads us in helping those with mental illness and helps our community to begin the conversation. The moment this Shabbos is out, tonight, tomorrow, consider going online and donating to help support it. Consider coming on September 11th to volunteer or just to cheer on those of us who are running. Let us not allow those who suffer from mental illness to suffer alone. Let us ask how we can help, how we can support them, and let us not stand by while our neighbor bleeds. Can you hear us?